It's been particularly difficult for House Republicans. It's been a rather embarrassing 22 days. And so I think a series of frustrations and bloodletting in the family meetings finally resulted in complete exhaustion. And Mike Johnson, who is a fairly well-liked member of Congress, although relatively unknown outside of Washington, there was unanimous support. So I think he came in at the right time. And I think a lot is going to be said for his ability to move forward. Hopefully he'll be able to take that unanimous support and move it into the legislative
So does
sphere.
this mean that Donald Trump is now back to holding the most sway of the Republican Party? Because what we do know Mike Johnson for is leading the way on that amicus brief to overturn the election results. Mike Johnson is an election denier. He doesn't believe that American democracy worked in 2020. He doesn't believe that President Biden fairly won the election. And all of the people in his party supported a person like that for Speaker of the House. Does that mean, well, either none of them believe in the U.S. democracy or they're all sort of heeding the Trumpian call?
Well, first I'll say Donald Trump is the de facto leader of the Republican Party. There is no doubt about that. He is the former president. He's running for re-election, right? And he is the leading candidate in the primary. So, there's little doubt that Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. That being said, he did have some sort of force within the last 22 days, putting in his support first for Jordan, who failed, quite frankly, then opposition to Tom Emmer, who had already had about 26 votes against him already. So whether that sank him or whether that sort of sealed the deal, I think is sort of an open question. But moving forward, into 2024, into an election year, I have no doubt that this Republican conference will be united behind whoever is the Republican primary candidate. And right now, Donald Trump is taking a heavy lead there.
All right. So where does the Republican Party go now? Where does the House go now from a legislative perspective?
Well, two things, right? So first, they have to get appropriations bills across the House floor. And they need their appropriations bills because they are marking to FY22 levels. The Senate is marking to FY23 levels. That is a big disagreement, right? So over the next several weeks, you're going to see the House Republicans moving the House appropriations bills across the table. That will be quite a feat on some of these bills, which are rather controversial, to keep that Republican majority united because they only have a 4-vote margin. They can only lose 4 or 5 votes depending on the day, depending on how many members are in town. And so that will put them in the negotiating position that they'll need to have in order to negotiate with the Senate on government funding going forward. And then, of course, there is the defense supplemental that the White House sent to the Senate last week. It's currently being debated, discussed through hearings, through regular process in the Senate. I expect the same to happen in the House, but that's going to take a little bit of time. And that's funding Israel, Ukraine, Indo-Pacific, the border, and there are going to be a lot of disagreements, a lot of controversies around the policy that surrounds that money.
In terms of cutting spending, is there any hope that these Republicans are going to be able to rein it in after we've seen, basically deficits since Bill Clinton? Say what you will about the philandering of William Jefferson Clinton. At least he balanced the budget, right? Is there any hope that something like that happens ever again in our lifetimes, Jen?
That's right. And Bill Clinton came together with House Republicans, with Newt Gingrich, and was able to do that really in a bipartisan way. I don't necessarily see that sort of work being done between the White House and this Republican conference in the House. I do think, though, we will see it's going to naturally happen because of the debt ceiling deal, the parameters set forth. Either there is a 1% cut across the board starting January 1st, or they are able to come to some sort of agreement on appropriations that is going to lower the levels of spending. Because you're right, we're facing a $33 trillion national debt, over $1 billion a day in interest payments. The numbers came in on our deficit this year. It's about $2 trillion. That's more than $2 trillion more than we're bringing in, right? We're spending. That's a real problem.
And much more than had been anticipated.
Voters. Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Into a 5% GDP in Q3.
Exactly.
It's not like we're trying to spend ourselves out of a recession here. I mean, this economy is on fire.
And fuego.
Yeah.
So, Jen, is there any reason to believe that this new speaker will have any more success than the prior speaker in terms of dealing with the extreme right in the party, whether it's those 6-7 people, whoever they are?
He's just dealing with himself.
Yeah, that's a $64,000 question, right? I mean, this member has only ever had to speak for himself and for his constituencies in Louisiana. He has held a leadership position in the sense he was vice chair prior to the speakership. So he's been at the leadership table. He's heard the strategy. He's been part of that discussion. So he's coming in with some context, some awareness, and he certainly had to understand the factions and what he needed to do in order to bring together the members of this conference in order to get to the speakership. I think going forward, he has suggested in his run for speakership earlier this week with the conference, he has suggested that he wants to pass a CR into January or April 15th, which is another magic deadline as regards to budget, in order to get that leverage for Republicans in the House to really negotiate with the Senate. This is going to be his first test. This will be key to show whether or not he can bring this conference together.